thought that since today was Rosh Chodesh Adar, it's not too early to begin speaking about Adar and Purim. We'll take a little break from the Parsha. Maybe we'll touch on it a little bit. And we'll talk about Adar. Chazal tell us, Meshenichnas Adar marvin b'simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, so we increase our joy. Adar is the happiest month of the year. So I'd like to explain first a little bit about the month of Adar. There is a dispute in the Gemara when the world was created. Was the world created in the month of Tishrei, which is fall, or was it created in the month of Nisan, which is spring? Now, it means this: that the world looks very different in Nisan than it does in Tishrei. In Nisan, we've just gone through the long winter, and everything is coming back to life. The grass is beginning to sprout, the trees are beginning to bud. That's what the world looks like in Nisan. In Tishrei, we have completed the growing season, and we are about to face a long, cold winter. The question is, when the world was created, what did it look like? What did it look like? Which did it look like? Did it look like Nisan? Did it look like Tishrei? So it's a machlokas, dispute in the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshiva. And the dispute revolves around two verses in the Chumash. That in the very first chapter of Parshas, when God created the plants on the third day, He said that Darchei deshe, let the earth be covered with grass. And it says, let there be eitz pri osa pri, fruit trees that produce fruit. So what does that mean, fruit trees? Fruit trees means trees that are already bearing fruit. And that means when God gave His word, He was describing what the world looks like in Tishrei. But interestingly, when the world came into existence, it says, Vatotzei haaretz deshe, that the earth began to sprout grass, and it produced eitz osa pri, trees that produce fruit. But they weren't called fruit trees. The implication is that when the trees were created, they did not bear fruit. They had the potential to grow fruit, but they didn't bear fruit at that time. Which means that the earth came into existence in the Nisan mode, where everything is just sprouting. So the dispute is, which verse is the fact? So one opinion is the world was made in Nisan, the other opinion was made in Tishrei. There are contradictions as to which opinion we follow. And in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, Tosfos brings from Rabbeinu Tam a resolution. He says that when God contemplated creating the world, He contemplated creating the world in Tishrei. When it actually came into existence, it came into existence in Nisan. Now that doesn't mean it took 6 months for it to happen. It means when God thought to create the world, He thought to create the world looking as the world looks in Tishrei. But for some reason, the world came into existence looking as it looks in Nisan. Now this Rabbeinu Tam is not so outlandish, because in fact, this is actually the resolution of the apparent contradiction in the verses. In other words, it says first that God said, let the earth be covered with grass, and let the trees already have fruit, which is a description of Tishrei. But when it actually happened, the grass was just sprouting, and the trees were bare, which is the description of Nisan. So in the Gemara, it's really very puzzling, because each opinion will have to explain away the verse, which is at first glance a refutation. Rabbeinu Tam's compromise actually is the resolution. God's intention was that it should be one way, and somehow the world came out differently. Well, this is quite odd. Like, what does that mean? That God wanted it to be one way, and somehow it just came out in an unexpected way. Very, very bizarre. So the Shemesh Shmuel says a very, very beautiful pshat. He says there's something else we know about the world. Chazal tell us that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make the world with midas hadin. He wanted to make the world with strict justice. He saw the world could not be sustained, and therefore he blended in midas harachman. He blended in divine mercy. Now, let's understand that statement of Chazal deeply. He wanted to create the world with midas hadin, with strict judgment, and it didn't work out, so he saw that the world needed mercy, so he blended in mercy. Like, what does that mean? It means like this. Why did God create the world? Now, this is a tough question. It obviously was not to satisfy some need that God had, because our very definition of God entails his self-sufficiency. He doesn't need anything. So the answer which the mystics give is that God had a desire to bestow good on others. Now, at first glance, this is a hard thing to understand, but I'll give you an example from our experience. You know, sometimes poor people come collecting for stalker. So they knock on our doors, and we hear their stories, and we feel compassion, so we give them. But we tell ourselves, you know, if nobody would be knocking on my door, I'd also be very happy. You know, that would mean that no one is in need, and therefore no one needs my charity. So never, if people need, I'm glad they found their way to my door. But if there'd be nobody that would need it, I'd also be happy. There are some people who have such a yearning to do good that if there was no one in need, they would feel, so where am I going to have an opportunity to do good? It's true, they're not going to create needs, but they'll feel something is missing in their own lives because they can't bestow good on others. The most similar thing in our own experience is the desire of parents to give birth to children. Because if they would not bring these little bundles of joy into the world, no one would have any needs. You wouldn't have to feed them, clothe them, educate them, raise them, discipline them. And no one would miss your largesse. But because we want to give, we want to bestow our love on others, so we are inspired to bring children into the world and address their needs. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the same way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave birth, so to speak, to a universe because he wanted to bestow his kindness upon it. Now, the mystics go a step further, and they say that God could have given us everything on a silver platter. He could have given us all the bounty of this world and all the spiritual bliss of the next world gratis. But in his wisdom, he understood that we would be more appreciative if we earned it. If we earned it. And therefore, God designed the world in such a way that there are two stages of life. There is what we call Olam Hazeh, this world. This is our opportunity to earn. It's in this world we're tested, we're challenged, and we have an opportunity to earn our eternal bliss, which we will enjoy in the next world, the spiritual bliss of the next world. So there are two stages of life. This is the world of testing and earning. The next world is the world of payment for our good deeds. Now, if you think about it for a moment, if this is the scheme, God wants us to earn it, what does that mean to earn it? I hate to quote the president, but the president made a comment about people that start businesses. And he said, you didn't make that. You didn't build that. Because the government gave you the roads and the infrastructure which is necessary for the success of your business. Now, again, I disagree with his point. I don't think that his economic policies are wise, but there is some truth to that. The truth is that entrepreneurs do have certain benefits from infrastructure that was created by government and so on and so forth. If you really wanted the satisfaction of building a business, you have to really create it from scratch. You'd be given nothing, not a road and not a sidewalk and not an electric grid, nothing. You have to, from zero, like we would drop you in the middle of the Sahara Desert and say, here you are. Here, with nothing. No roads, no cars, no power.
No taxes.
No taxes. Create a business here.
No customers.
No customers either.
Doesn't the entrepreneur have an argument, his argument, that there's no government that gave us the roads?
That's true. That's right.
The circular government.
I'm mentioning it just to be funny.
Okay.
But the point is that Rebbeinu Shalom, if he really wanted to challenge us, that we should really earn our bliss, he should really give us nothing. Nothing. And you would then be deserving of whatever you accomplished in your life. That means he would not give us even directions. He would say, listen, it's your job to figure out right from wrong and live accordingly. And if he gave us the Torah, half the battle is won. Right now, we already know what right and wrong is. Now we just have to live up to it. Right? Half the battle is done, right? I remember when I was in high school, we complained about a teacher who gave us too much material to study for a test. So we go into the principal's office, we give him this stack of papers, and says, look what he's making us study. So the principal looks at this stack of sheets, and he sees that they're printed only on one side. He says, well, half the battle is won. One side of the sheet. You try that in school. See if you get away with it. Anyway, but the point is that really, if the world was made with strict midas hadin, with strict judgment, there'd be no concessions, our lives wouldn't be made easier, we'd be challenged to the ultimate extreme, and then we would truly be deserving of our bliss if we earned it. Furthermore, and this is a very important thing, you'd have only one chance. If you batch it the first time, you'd be finished. There'd be no potential for tshuva or repentance, no, give me a second chance, wouldn't be. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that the world is not sustainable, wouldn't work. So therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in midas harachmi, blended in mercy. Gives us the opportunity to repent, correct our mistakes. Our challenges are not as difficult as they could have been. You know, all of us think our challenges are difficult, but it would be very easy with a little imagination to imagine them being much harder. Imagine whatever challenges you have in your life, imagine if you have to do them alone, without the support of family and friends. Imagine if you have to do them without eyes and ears. A person who's blind and deaf, and so on and so forth. Our challenges may be difficult, but they're not as difficult as they could have been. That's also an aspect of midas harachmin, with divine mercy. But that was really plan B. In theory, if God wanted to create a world in which we would earn our bliss, it should operate under the strict principles of judgment. God saw it wasn't sustainable, so therefore God blended in mercy. Now, in the mystical tradition, when we talk about God's chesed, his kindness, versus his judgment, his midas hadin, what we're really talking about is this. Chesed is something which is expansive. This is God showering his bounty upon us. He gives and he provides and he bestows. That's chesed, that's kindness. Din is tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means holding back, restraint. But the HaKadosh Baruch Hu only gives us that which we've earned, that which we deserve, and not a drop more. And that's really the question. Which way should God create the world? In the annual agricultural cycle, the month of Tishrei corresponds to Din, And the month of Nisan corresponds to Chesed. And the reason for that is very simple. Think about it for a moment. That what is winter? What is winter? Winter is the season of year where there is no infusion of warmth and light and energy and growth. Everything is allowed to die, everything is cold, everything is static. That's what winter is. Now, Tishrei, it might be the month of bounty because it's the conclusion of the growing season, but it really is the month in which we begin to face winter. Because we've harvested the plants because the growing season has ended. And soon we're going to get into the fall. It's an amazing thing about fall. And many people think fall is the most beautiful month, which the leaves turn colors. But really that's indicative of imminent death. It's almost as if God says, if you're going to die, go out in a blaze. It's like a fish. You take a fish out of water. You know, in the water the fish glides effortlessly. When you take the fish out of water, the fish begins to thrash and flap and flip. And you think that there's no time that the fish is more alive than those moments out of water. That means that death is imminent. Right? These are the death throes of the fish. So the leaves turning color, these are the death throes of the tree. Soon it's going to be a dormant, cold winter, but he will shed its leaves. And the Tishrei is the beginning of that part of cycle. God holds back his infusion of warmth and energy and light, and everything begins to die and become cold. That's what Tishrei is all about. Nisan is the opposite. Nisan is spring. Everything is Aviv. Everything begins to sprout. Everything begins to grow anew. This is when God infuses the world again with energy and vitality, and everything begins to grow. And therefore, Tishrei is the month of din. It's the month of restraint, the month of tzimtzum, when God is holding back. And likewise, it's the month of judgment. It's when we're subjected to judgment. Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. These are the days of judgment. And we have to give an accounting. Because in Tishrei, it's like God says, I'm only going to give you exactly what you deserve and not more. Nisan is the month of Chesed, the month of kindness. The greatest historical kindness is to the Jewish people in the month of Nisan. This is when the Yetzias Mitzrayim was. This is when Moshiach is going to come. Chazal say, Nisan, Asidim Ligoyel. The future redemption will be in Nisan. This is the month of God's kindness. He bestows and showers us with his bounty. These are the two poles of the year. So now think about it. When God was contemplating creating the world, he wanted to create the world with midas adin, strict judgment, restraint, holding back his bounty from the undeserving. So what would the world have looked like if it was made with midas adin? It would have looked like Tishrei. But instead, God saw it wasn't sustainable, so he made the world with midas harachamim, with chesed, with kindness. And therefore, what did the emerging world look like? It looked like Nisan. That's the amazing insight of Rabbi Eliezer is. In other words, God wanted to create it one way, but it came out a different way. Not because it was a fluke, but because of this idea that a world that was made with midas hadin would look like Tishrei. A world made with midas harachamim looks like Nisan. And of course, the holidays of Tishrei are very different than the holidays of Nisan. Tishrei are the days of fear, because we understand that when we are subjected to judgment, we know God is judging us. So what is the appropriate emotional response? You know, sometimes you meet a person, you threaten the person, and you say, if you don't do such and such, I'm going to cut your throat. And the person starts laughing, right? And you say, this person doesn't get it, right? And that's not an appropriate emotional response to a threat. So, if the Rebbeinu Shalom is judging us, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this is the month of Din, what is the appropriate response? Not to laugh. Right? The appropriate response is fear, is awe. And that's what Yomim Noroim are all about. These are the days of awe, these are the days of fear. It says Nisan. What is the appropriate response to God's kindness, gratitude, love, joy? Right? And that's what the temple of Nisan is all about. In Tishrei, we read Sefer Koheles. And Sefer Koheles, if you really want to know what it's all about, very hard book, but it's Shlomo HaMelech's manual on serving God with fear, with awe. How do I know that? Because at the very end of the pasuk, end of the Sefer, it says, "Sof dover akol nishma," and after all is said and done, Es Elokim Yirah, fear God, vis mitzvasav shemor, and observe His mitzvahs. Ki zeh kol adam. This is what man is. Koheles was the book that Shlomo HaMelech wrote about serving Hashem with yira. That's what we read in Tishrei. What do we read in Nisan? Shir Hashirim. What is Shir Hashirim? Shir Hashirim is the book that Shlomo HaMelech wrote about serving God with love. It's an allegory of the love of a man and a woman, which of course corresponds to the love of the Ribono Shel Olam and the Jewish people. So these are two different poles of the year. Now we know that there's a preparatory month before Tishrei to get us into the mood of Tishrei. That's the month of Elul. Right? Elul is the right. You don't just fall into a month like Tishrei. But there's an expression, a very interesting expression. People don't know what the origin of the expression is. In Yiddish, you say when a person just falls into something without preparation, it's v'ayavon in sukkah. Like a yavan falls into a sukkah. What is a yavan? So yavan is Greece. It would be like a Greek in the sukkah. What does that do with the Greek in the sukkah? Right? So yavan is really a Hebraicized version of the Russian name Ivan. A yavan in sukkah is like an Ivan in the sukkah. Right? Like a Russian, a non-Jewish Russian falls into a sukkah. Right? There's no preparation, there's no understanding. So it's the yavan in sukkah. Now, you don't just fall into Rosh Hashanah like that. It has to be preparation. You got to prepare. I am often reminded of a conversation. David will know this. That once we had a group we were learning, and one person in the group mentioned that he's traveling to India. Going to India. And someone else in the group says, you don't just go to India. Go to India. He says, you're going to India, you have to prepare. You have to read, you have to study, otherwise you don't know what you're seeing. Right? Go to India. Right? It dawned on me, we go to Eretz Yisrael. Are we ready for Eretz Yisrael? Before we go to Eretz Yisrael, we should be reading and studying, preparing we're going to see in Israel. But time also requires preparation. So before Rosh Hashanah, you don't just fall into Rosh Hashanah, days of judgment, days of awe. So we have a preparatory month. That's the month of Elul. So Elul is our preparation for Tishrei. So we have 30 days of preparation. And if we use that Elul properly, then we're ready for Tishrei. So in the same way that there's a preparatory month for Tishrei, there's a preparatory month for Nisan. Right? Nisan is the month of God's kindness, and our appropriate response is love and joy and gratitude. We've got to prepare for that. That's the month of Adar. Right? Adar is to Nisan what Elul is to Tishrei. That's the preparatory month. Sifrei Chasidus tell us this. Right? So in the same way we have a month to prepare for Tishrei, we have a month to prepare for Nisan. Chazal say, Mishnichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha, that when the Adar comes in, we increase our joy. Rashi says in Maseches Tainas that it means until Pesach is over. Whereas we start Rosh Chodesh Adar, but the joy continues until the end of Pesach. But it means that really it's all focused on Pesach. It's all focused on Nisan. Adar is a preparatory month to Nisan. Many people think once Purim is over, that's it. It's not true. The whole month of Adar. Right? Purim is just a way station on the way. We're really preparing for Nisan and Pesach. So the whole month has to be a month of joy. There are 4 special Parshas, 4 special Torah readings that are associated with the month of Adar. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on the Shabbos, then we read Parshas Shkolim on Rosh Chodesh Adar. This year, of course, Rosh Chodesh fell out during the week. Rosh Chodesh was Sunday and Monday. So we read Parshas Shkolim last Shabbos, which technically was still Shvat, but it's preparatory for Adar. Then the Shabbos before Purim, we read Parshas Zohar, which recounts the mitzvah of remembering what Amalek did to the Jewish people. Then the next to the last Shabbos in Adar, we read Parshas Para. Parshas Para, which talks about the Para Aduma. This is part of the preparation for Pesach, when we had a carbon Pesach. And everyone had to be ritually pure to bring the carbon. So you had to be sprinkled with the ashes of the Para Aduma. And the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or Rosh Chodesh Nisan itself, the full-time Shabbos, is Parshas HaChodesh, which talks about the mitzvah of sanctifying the new moon, and of course the mitzvahs that pertain to the Karban Pesach. Many Svarim try to demonstrate that the 4 Parshas correspond to 4 of this or 4 of that. Well, there are a lot of 4s, Baruch Hashem, in the Jewish pantheon. You know, you have the 4 sons, and you have the 4 expressions of redemption, and the 4 letters of God's name, and all sorts of 4s. And many Svarim try to show that the 4 Parshas correspond to the 4 of this or the 4 of that. You know, there's a certain way of thinking. People like to show that numbers have a correspondence. I'd like to point out that perhaps the 4 Parshas correspond to a very interesting 4 that we have. In Megillas Esther, where the Torah talks about the great celebration after the miracle of Purim, there is a 4-fold expression. It says, La Yehudim, the Jews had Ora, V'simcha, V'sason, V'yikar. They had light, which is a metaphor for happiness, and they had happiness, and they had joy, and they had honor. These are the 4 expressions. Ora, V'simcha, V'sason, V'yikar. So that's 4. So since these are 4 aspects of the celebration of Adar, it says that when Haman was hanged and Mordechai came out of the palace wearing the royal garments, it says, La Yehudim haisa ora v'simcha v'sasim v'yikar. The Jews had these 4 things. That was in the month of Adar. So if there are 4 aspects to the joy of Adar, it would make very good sense to say that the 4 Parshas, the 4 special Torah readings, perhaps correspond to these 4 different aspects of celebration of Adar. So let's see how they line up. Let's talk about that verse first of all. Right? The Jews had light and simcha and happiness and sason and joy and yikar and honor. And the Gemara in Megillah says a very, very curious thing. The Gemara in Megillah gives an odd explanation to each of these 4. It says, Ora zu Torah. Well, it says the Jews had light. It means they had Torah. Maybe you better translate Ora not as light, but as enlightenment. So if you think of enlightenment, well, enlightenment comes from Torah. The Jews had Torah. Simcha, that means Yontif. They had a holiday. And the simple explanation was that there was an extra holiday that was added. And Purim. just want to mention one thing I've said tongue-in-cheek, but maybe there's some truth to it. That, we are meant to be very indignant and angry at Haman for what he tried to do to the Jewish people. And yet, somehow, it's very hard for us to get our anger up about Haman, because we're so grateful to Haman. Thanks to him, we have Purim. But imagine if there was no Haman. We'd have no Purim. So how angry can we get at him? So I want to give you something to be angry about at Haman. It's like this. That Haman schemed to annihilate the Jews on a single day. Well, that's a pretty bold objective. A single day, you can annihilate an entire people on a single day. And it wouldn't have made more sense if there should have been a week. Like a week devoted to killing Jews, but why a single day? So the answer which is given is like this, because Haman knew that there was a possibility of failure. So he figured that if I designate one day for the destruction of the Jews and I fail, they'll celebrate for one day. If I designate a week and I fail, they'll celebrate a week. Right? So now you have something to get angry at Haman about, right? That if not for his stinginess, we could have had a week of Purim. Because we only have one day of Purim. Now, I know some people that really would like to get it for that. But in any case, so there's an extra holiday. There's an extra holiday. Thanks to Haman, there's an extra holiday. Then it says circumcision. They had circumcision. Sason is circumcision. Sason is umila. Now this is a little more hard to understand. What does the defeat of Haman have to do with having circumcision? So the answer is very simple. When the Jews were on the verge of being annihilated, so undoubtedly there were Jewish babies born in that year. And if you were a parent, what would be the prudent thing to do? Not to give your child a bris. This way you can take the baby, you can leave the baby with a Gentile family, and hopefully at least the baby will be spared. I know I have an older cousin who was born in Germany shortly before the Holocaust. And his life was saved. His mother left him with a Christian family. And of course he was circumcised. But his mother's instructions were never, never, never undress. Even in school, whatever, swimming, never undress in front of other children. But they shouldn't pick up on the fact that you're circumcised, you may be Jewish. They said undoubtedly people did this. So when Haman was defeated and the Jews were spared, then there was the restoration of Mila, circumcision. And Yakar, honor, is a reference to tefillin. Now keep in mind that in the olden days, there were people that wore tefillin all day. It was like we wear a yarmulke. In the street, people wore tefillin. So therefore, at this time, when Jews' lives were at risk, undoubtedly people stopped wearing tefillin. It's not out in the street. They're not going to publicly wear tefillin. Advertise, I'm a Jew. So when Haman was defeated, tefillin was also restored. So the Gemara says that these expressions, Ora, Simcha, Sason, Bakar, refer to Torah and Yom Tov and Mila and tefillin. I'd like to take this in a figurative sense, that these four concepts really are symbolic of the necessary conditions for achieving simcha, joy in life. And let's understand what is joy. What does it mean happiness? What does it mean to be happy? Now, this is a very, very curious thing. You see, if I were to ask you right now, are you happy? Right now. Right now, are you happy? Of course you're happy. Right? Everyone's happy, right? We're here together, we're learning, we're talking to Torah. Everyone, at this moment, everyone is happy. But if I would ask you, but I don't want to know about now. I want to know overall, your whole life, all things considered, are you happy? So a person might say, well, I'm not so happy. Right? Life isn't what I like it to be. No, this person has financial problems, this person has family problems, this person has personal, emotional problems. Everyone has their peckle. So, peckle is Yiddish for a load. Everyone has their own load. So not everyone. True happiness is not momentary happiness. True happiness is a judgment that we make about the totality of our lives. And therefore, to know whether we really have had happy lives really is a judgment you can only make at the end of your life. At the end of your life, looking back, you can say, my life was lived well. It was a happy life. I have no misgivings. I achieved what I hoped to achieve. That's an amazing, amazing thing. By the way, that's why tshuva is such an important aspect of true happiness. Because when you think about it, who can look back over his whole life without any misgivings? And we all make mistakes, sins, things wrong. But that's the idea of tshuva. The idea of tshuva is since we can rectify our past. So through the process of tshuva, we can look back over all our life with a sense of satisfaction and happiness. Because we know what was good and what was bad, we can rectify. We can wipe away. It's an amazing thing. I think tshuva is a tremendously important aspect of happiness. And maybe when we get to Rosh Hashanah, we'll talk about tshuva. We'll come back to this idea, how tshuva is absolutely integral to happiness. But this is the idea. Happiness is a judgment about our lives as a whole. So what is necessary? What are the necessary conditions for living a happy life? Okay, so the first necessary condition is, I believe, you have to live life with a sense of purpose. Right? There has to be a reason that you are here, that you are not here merely to survive. Because many people live their lives as if the tachlis, the objective, is mere survival. We work to eat, and we eat to work, and we eat and work to go on vacation, and we go on vacation to rest up, to be able to eat and work again. So what's the purpose? What's the goal? What's the objective? So life has to have an objective. For a Jew, where does he find that objective? Where did he discover that objective? He discovers that in Torah. First of all, Torah gives an overall plan for the Jewish people as a whole. But if a person is very insightful, he can find in Torah the very personal messages. I'll mention as an aside, just go off on a tangent, an amazing thing I once heard from Moshe Wolfson, who's a very, very, very important rabbi in the East. And he pointed out that about Megillah Esther, which of course is a part of Torah, that, and by the way, may be what Megillah talks about when it says the Jews had Torah. I mean, we always had Torah. It might mean this extra chunk of Torah that we were given Purim time, which is the Megillah. The Megillah calls itself a sefer, calls itself a book, and it calls itself an igeris, a letter. And he wants to like this. What is in a book and a letter? Right? A book is something for the masses. When a person publishes a book, it's meant to be of broad interest to everybody. An igeris, a letter, is something which is very, very, very personal. If I would get a letter from my daughter and son-in-law in Lakewood, and they would say that, Shifra, my granddaughter, Shifra started crawling today, and and she's smiling, and we went for Shabbos to cousin such and such, and the chant was so delicious, and anybody finding this letter, who cares when this baby is crawling and how the chant was, and when I get that letter, right, I want to read it again and again and again and again. It's so heartwarming to hear what my kids are doing and the family and the baby. And a letter is very personal. A book is for everybody. Torah is a sefer and an igeris. The Megillah is certainly that way. There are lessons which are broad lessons relevant to the entire nation. There are personal lessons. They're just for you. It's just for you to find. In that sense, it's an igeris. It's a letter. It's personal. right? The messages that are meant for you aren't meant for anybody else. And that's what it means. The Yehudim HaSha'ara, the Jews had light. They had the enlightenment of Torah. It means that through Torah they were able to discover what the meaning, what the objective, what the purpose of a life should be. That's the first necessary condition, and perhaps the most important necessary condition. If you don't have meaning in your life, you're not going to have a life of joy. You're going to look back after 120 years and say, what was it all about? For what? What did I muddle through 120 years for? But if you can find that meaning, that purpose, that objective, say, that's what it was for. That's why I lived. That's why I was put in this world. That is what God wanted for me, and I lived accordingly. That is the first step in the process of achieving Fri Jul. That's Ora Zu Torah, the first step. It's important to know that role that each and every one of us is meant to play is not necessarily going to be something which is big and major and headline grabbing, or something that will even stand independently of the efforts of others. It may be that I play a supporting role. It may be that I contribute to the efforts of others. It may even be, sometimes, that the true meaning of my life, or aspects of my life, I may not even be aware of. That's what's especially frightening. You may discover after 120 years the significance of your life, and it was nothing you were conscious of at the time. But there are stories of people who did great things without realizing it. I once read a story about a fellow. There was a fellow, he was a Texan, and not a religious Jew. And one day he walks into the synagogue of the Orthodox rabbi in one of the cities in Texas, we'll say it's Dallas, and he says, Rabbi, I'd like to do something for you, for this synagogue. What can I do? So the rabbi says, we're in the process of building a new building. So if you'd like to make a contribution to the building fund, we'd be glad to take it off your hands, No, that would never turn out an Asian. So he says, well, Rabbi, tell me, what's the project cost? He says, $2 million. So he writes a check for a massive sum of money. And the rabbi obviously is dumbstruck, and he asks him, well, why are you doing this? So he says like this, he says, I was in Israel, and I went to the Kotel, and I saw a person praying there with tremendous fervor, tremendous passion. I'd never seen such a thing, because, my experience in Judaism has been it's fairly sterile, cold. I saw this person praying with such great fervor. So I asked my friend, he says, tell me, he says, back home in Dallas, he says, where do the people like that pray? So my friend said, I don't know if there's anybody like that in Dallas, but if there is, they're going to pray in the Orthodox synagogue. So he said, I don't want to do something for the people that pray like that. And he came back. Now, let's think about it for a second. That guy who was praying at the Kotel, who was the inspiration for this Texan, I'm sure had no idea of the impact his prayers had. But after 120 years, when he goes to heaven and they're going to give him a accounting of what he achieved in his life, they're going to mention to him that, you were responsible for building a synagogue in Dallas, Texas. What? Me? I don't do what I do. I don't do that. So no, you don't realize. It says one day you were praying at the Kotel, and this fellow saw you, and he was inspired, and he went, and he made a major donation, which made it all possible, and it's all because of you. It's an amazing thing. Even if the story isn't true, it's an amazing thing. If it's true, it's still amazing. But putting that aside, because to a great extent, many of the things that we do are really joint efforts. Right? The meaning of my life is not going to be achieved in something which I do unilaterally on my own, It may be in supporting someone, in supporting a spouse, in supporting a child, in helping others in the community. And a joint effort is achieved. That's the idea of Parshas Shkolim. The lesson of Parshas Shkolim is the idea that the purpose we achieve in our life is often achieved through a joint effort. Every person gives a half shekel. Well, this is an odd thing, right? If God wanted a certain monetary value, why didn't He create a coin equal to that value, give it another name, call it the dinar, call it whatever you want to call it, and that would be a coin which is the equivalent of the biblical half shekel. So instead of people giving half of something, people would feel they're giving a whole thing. And the answer is exactly the opposite. The whole point is to understand I'm giving a half shekel. I'm only making a contribution. I'm only accomplishing something together with the other person who gives the other half shekel. So Parshas Shkolim corresponds to the idea of living a life with a purpose, but it takes it to a higher level of understanding. Ora zu Torah. Torah is the source of our meaning. It's from Torah that we understand that we have to seek meaning in life, we have to seek purpose in life. Parshas Shkolim teaches us that don't think that the meaning of your life is going to be in the grand achievement that you do by yourself, for yourself. Or it'll be like the half shekel. It may be something that you contribute to, something you join others in. Your cooperation, your sharing. That's what purpose of life will be. So that's, I think, the correspondence of Ora, Torah, and Parshas Shkolim, the first of the 4 weeks of Adar. Then we come to Simcha. Right? Simcha is Yontif. What is Yontif? Now, this is a very important thing. You know, a person can have, a very clear idea of the meaning of his life, and yet he has no opportunity to live in accordance with that purpose. You know, survival is very, very difficult, daunting. In other words, we need to eat, we need to clothe ourselves, we need to have a roof over our heads, got to pay the taxes, and all those things. And as a result, we all know, that if only I had time for learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and being involved in the life of the community, and I would live a life of meaning. But where does the time fly? Where does the time fly? You ever feel like that? You ever feel like that?
Sure.
I feel like that all the time. All the time. I have all sorts of schemes in my head. Things I want to do, and things I want to learn, and things I want to teach, and the books I'd like to write, and I have all sorts of ideas, right? And yet, what do I end up doing? Take the carpool, do the shopping, help out a little bit in the house. Not too much. Not overdo it, but So you have to have islands of time that are opportunities for doing what you have to do. And that's what Yontif is. That's what Shabbos is. Right? These are the times that we can utilize. It's a shame that some of us work on Shabbos. Rabbis, terrible thing. But if you have the luxury of not having to work on Shabbos, then Shabbos is a golden opportunity. Again, the sad thing about Shabbos is that we are so wound up from the week that we finally begin to relax about Shalosh Shudas time. Right? Until then, we're just so tense. Until finally, relax, calm. It's like a half hour till Havdalah. It's a very sad thing, but I think there is a solution to that, Father. I'll just mention as an aside. What we really have to do is not change our Shabbos as much as change our Friday. Now, you go to Israel, you discover an amazing thing in Israel, because all the stores that you would shop in are owned by Jews. So in the religious areas, at least, they close early on Friday. After 2 o'clock, if you need to buy something in a religious neighborhood, you're out of luck. That's it. Everything is closed. So therefore, the last couple hours before Shabbos are very, very quiet, very calm, very serene, right? And you go into Shabbos with a sense of calm, a sense of relaxation, if you can really enjoy Shabbos, right? You can even take a nap, right? Here in America, if you're lucky enough to have your preparations for Shabbos finished a little bit early, so what do? Let's go to Yorkdale. We're going to go shopping, we're going to do it. Right? Because we have to change our Fridays. If we go into Shabbos with a little more menuchas and nefesh, more peace of mind, more at ease, then our Shabbos will be much different.
So you go in earlier too.
What?
You go into Shabbos earlier too.
Yeah.
It's a longer Shabbos.
The custom of Yerushalayim is candlelighting is 40 minutes before sunset. Not like here, it's only half the time. But in any case, that's what Yom Tov is. Yom Tov is an opportunity. We have to cherish those opportunities. There are other opportunities. Retirement is an opportunity. Now I'm looking forward to retirement. But I don't know if I'll do anything differently. maybe I'm retired already. I don't know. But people retire. This is a golden opportunity. They begin to not working as much. They can spend more time in prayer and study and so on and so forth. I knew a person. I knew a Jew, very, 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 very fine person. And he said that his dream. What was his dream when he retired? His dream was to be able to daven at a minyan in the morning where he could say korbanos. He could say the parts that are just kind of whipped through. That was his dream. That was his goal for retirement. To daven at a minyan and say korbanos. And he retired finally. And then someone asked him if he could learn with a boy who needed some help before davening. So he figured that's more important, but it ended up he wasn't able to take a bonus. But the point was, he was able to do good things in his retirement. So that's also a time to take advantage of. Vacations are times to take advantage of. So why do our vacations have to be so frenetic that we come back more frazzled than before the vacation? So the vacation is also a time for reflection and study and prayer and all the things. Amalek, and this is a long talk, but what Amalek wanted to prevent, he wanted to prevent the Jews taking advantage of their opportunities. When the Jews came out of Egypt, there was a range of spiritual opportunities that were going to be provided. They were going to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. They were going to come into Eretz Yisrael. We know there were 7 nations that wanted to stop us from coming into Eretz Yisrael. These were the 7 nations we had to conquer before we could have the opportunity to have the benefits of Eretz Yisrael. But Amalek is Reish's guy of Amalek. Amalek was considered the first. He was the father, so to speak, of the 7 nations. He wanted to stop us not at the threshold of Eretz Yisrael, but just as we left Egypt. And take away our opportunities. Take away those opportunities for spirituality that we had. We have to remember that. Remember what Amalek tried to do to you. And remember that there are all sorts of evildoers that want to take these opportunities away from us. But if you want to be able to look back at your life with satisfaction and joy, right, you have to fight sometimes with great vigor and energy those forces of evil that would take away those spiritual opportunities from you. So the second aspect of joy, which is Yom Tov, the idea of taking advantage of the opportunities to live life with meaning, that involves sometimes fighting Amalek, fighting the forces that wish to stop us from taking advantage of those opportunities. Then there's something else we have to understand, that okay, we have an idea of the meaning of our lives, and we have an idea of the opportunities of time and resources we have to take advantage of. But it's important to know a third thing, which is the idea that our life will not be meaningful unless it is pure. Meaning, if we contaminate our lives with things that are contrary to the meaning that we aspire to, we're not going to be satisfied. We're not going to be satisfied with something which is contaminated, something which is an admixture. It has to be pure. And this is the odd thing that people that know the right thing and they know what they should be doing, nevertheless are often tempted to do things and experience things and have things which are totally contrary to their spiritual objectives in life. And that, of course, corresponds to Parshas Parah, the Parah Aduma. The Parah Aduma is purity, and of course, Sason Zumila, circumcision, is also perfection. It's removing the foreskin and removing that which is negative, right? Leaving behind that which is totally pure. Very, very important thing. There are people that have good ideas and they know what would give their lives meaning, and they have opportunities and they take advantage of the opportunities, and yet they mess everything up by defiling themselves, and as a result their lives are not as pure expressions of that meaning as they want them to be. And finally, the last aspect of joy, I think, is the idea of Yikar Elu Tefillin. This is an honor. This is an honor. Sometimes, it's a very sad thing. We find ourselves in this is probably the most tragic situation, where we understand the meaning of our lives and we take advantage of our opportunities, we live a pure life, and yet we're not happy with ourselves because we don't have the support of those around us. Because imagine a person, I can't think of any situation more tragic than this, a person who wants to live as a Jew and is willing to make sacrifices to live as a Jew, and yet the person is not supported by his family, not supported by his community, not supported by his friends. It's a tragic thing, because it's almost impossible to have a truly happy life when you feel that you're always fighting against somebody. There are people who look down at your choices, people that think you're making terrible mistakes, that they insult you, they humiliate you. It's a terrible thing. It says Yikar, honor, is tefillin. Tefillin is the badge of honor. In other words, to be able to wear tefillin publicly means you live in a society which respects your choices, which admires your choices. Right? You don't have to be ashamed. Right? You can publicly wear your tefillin and everyone looks up to you. As the verse says, all the nations of the world will see that the name of God is upon you, and they shall revere you. And the Gemara says that it's a reference to tefillin shabaraish. That's a reference to tefillin. And that really is what Parshas HaChodesh is all about. It's an amazing thing. Parshas HaChodesh is the Parsha of Korban Pesach. And what is Korban Pesach? Korban Pesach was the bold statement of the Jewish people, that in the face of the Egyptians, they took the deity of Egypt, they slaughtered it, said we have nothing to be embarrassed about, we're not ashamed, says we're proud of the choices we make, right? Even if they are totally antithetical to everything you believe in. Says we support one another, we encourage one another. That's Parshas HaChodesh, and that's, I think, the fourth necessary element. So my conjecture is a little forced, maybe, but I think the points are nevertheless true. If we want to live lives that are truly happy, we need, number one, to identify what is the purpose of our lives, what is truly meaningful. We have to find those moments, those spare moments, those times where we can live in accordance with our true objectives. We have to make sure that our experience is as pure as possible. Don't tarnish it by trying to have your foot in both worlds. And finally, that you should be blessed to have a supportive community, a family and friends, and nation that supports your choices and honors you and respects you for the sacrifices that you make. If you can fulfill these four necessary conditions, then you can have a life of true happiness, true meaning. And those are perhaps hinted to in the four Parshas. It's a month of great joy. And again, joy also means celebration. We should party a little bit, comes Purim, and eat and drink and dance and sing and enjoy each other's company. But I think it's also a good time in preparation for Pesach to begin to think in terms of lives of meaning and purpose. And if we do that, then when Nisan comes, we're not going to be starting from scratch where we were a year ago. In other words, our Nisan this year will not be the same Nisan as last year. It'll be a higher level. The Jewish year sometimes is described as a circle. We go through the cycle of the year, and we come back to the same point 12 months later. But in reality, the Jewish year should not be viewed as a circle. It should be viewed as a spiral. In other words, when we come back to the same point, yes, it's the same point, but it should hopefully be higher up, not the exact same point as it was. When we come back to Nisan, it shouldn't be that every Nisan is the same as the last Nisan. We've had a whole year to build on that foundation. Hopefully, when we come to the next Nisan, it's the same point in one sense, but it's that much higher because we've had a process of ascent. This is the question: is Adar going to be a year, a month, where we forge ahead with full strength, and as a result, our Nisan will be elevated, or will Adar be the month that we run out of gas and hopefully manage just to come into the gas station on time for Nisan to be filled up again? That's really the question. Hopefully it'll be the former and not the latter. Everyone should have a very wonderful Chodesh. Bez Hashem, despite the fact that it's Family Day, we will meet next week.